Told that this mic is on. Is that correct? Okay, since this mic is on and since it is now time to start the rock talk, I'm going to start talking. Welcome to the Shoals Marine Laboratory's weekly marine science seminar. I'm Jessica Bolker. You may notice I am not Sarah Morris. I am a longtime Shoaler professor at University of New Hampshire, and I'm currently teaching the marine immersion class on the island. And I'm really delighted to introduce my colleague and co-instructor for marine immersion, Dr. Jason Goldstein, who is going to talk tonight about crustaceans as sentinels of change in the Gulf of Maine. Dr. Goldstein was the director of research at the Wells National Estuarine Research Reserve. He leads the reserve's ecological research and monitoring programs that advance knowledge and understanding of coastal ecosystems, communities, and natural resources in the Gulf of Maine. Dr. Goldstein's research focuses on crab and lobster fisheries and the effects of climate change on reproduction, physiology, and movement ecology. Dr. Goldstein earned his BS in biology from the University of Massachusetts, Dartmouth, has a master's degree from Old Dominion University, and he did his PhD work at the University of New Hampshire with Professor Emeritus Wynne Watson. He was awarded a Fulbright postdoctoral fellowship at the University of Haifa in Israel, and he's currently an affiliate research professor at UNH's School of Marine Science. This is the last rock talk of 2025, and 2025 is the 60th consecutive season of the Shoals Marine Laboratory. This is the oldest and largest marine lab in the country that is focused on undergraduate cultural and research. The lab is operated jointly by the University of New Hampshire and Cornell University. The seminars are called Rock Talk. Get out of it. Because back in the early days of the lab, before the construction of formal classrooms and labs, lectures and seminars literally happened out there on the rocks. We've now migrated indoors, but the weekly seminars continue to provide a really great opportunity for everybody in the island community to come together and learn about various aspects of marine science. So in addition to folks joining online, these talks are also Zoomable. We have 4 groups currently on the island. We have the second section of the Introduction to Marine Vertebrates in the Gulf of Maine. Thank you. The Marine Immersion class for incoming UNH freshmen. The Introduction to Marine Sciences program for Manchester High School students. And I hope the last class is ready to speak up for themselves. We have one of our public programs, Seascapes and Landscapes, where participants capture the beauty of the island in their artwork. So we're really excited to have everybody, both in person and online, joining us tonight. The talk will run about 45 minutes. There'll be 15 minutes of Q&A. For people who are here online, please use the Q&A box at the bottom of your Zoom screen, and we'll read your questions out loud so that everybody who's physically here can hear what they are. And for people who are here in person, we'll pass a microphone around so that everybody, including the people on Zoom, can hear you. So now please welcome me, join me in welcoming Dr. Jason Goldstein.
Did I hold it? Oh. All right. This is technology. So hi everybody. This is my first rock talk. I've been coming out here for a while with Professor Bolker, and this is my first time giving a talk to a Shoals-wide programs, students, staff, and I'm really happy to be here. And I wanted you to know that I was really planning on just showing you my artwork. I don't do art, but the artists do. So I'm really jealous of people that are able to paint and create things, but I'm going to at least show you some things that I've been up to over the summer. So I just want to start with a video of something really cool that what I did on my summer vacation with my staff. So we're trying to learn a little bit more about lobsters in their natural world. And so we set out these camera platforms. There's a bunch of us scuba diving, so you can see the scale. And on that platform are a bunch of cameras and a bunch of lobster bait. And we're trying to look at what predators might we find in the Gulf of Maine these days, especially on the coast of Maine. So we have interns reviewing hundreds and hundreds of hours of video of lobsters running around. This is all sped up, so we slow it all down, and we literally have some poor intern counting and measuring lobsters virtually. But they do get to go diving too. So this is a really cool project, and it's a great lead into what I'm going to be talking about tonight, which is sort of a medley of crustacean biology and science and cool stuff. So, but before I do that, I want to just give a shout out to some of my collaborators. These are just a few of the peeps that I work with. You'll notice there's a disproportionate number of UNH folks on this list because I've just forged good relationships with them, and they're really awesome people. And none of this work that I'm presenting tonight would be possible without their collective help. So you may know some of these folks. They are all fairly local in the area, so I'm really lucky that I get to work with high caliber scientists and just really good human beings. So as Jessica alluded to, I've been working with lobsters for about 20 years or so, and I have been very lucky that I've been able to work with lobsters of different kinds in different places. And I wish I could give you a talk just on that, but I'm not going to. So if you want to know about other exotic lobsters all over the world, I'm happy to tell you about them. And come grab me and I'll love to tell you the story. So I've worked mostly with American lobster, the big clawed lobster that we have here, but I've also worked with Caribbean spiny lobster. I've worked with flipper lobsters, which is that really weird looking cockroach looking thing with this temperature sensor on the back. And I've worked on a lot of different things. I'm sort of a jack of all trades, master of none. But I've really tried to focus on physiology, movement, behavior, and field ecology. Very quickly, where do I work? What do I do here? I have an affiliate appointment with UNH, but I also have a full-time job. I'm being the research director at one of the reserves of these 30. So the little red arrows pointing to Wells, Maine, that's my office. That's where our laboratory is. We're a NOAA-funded institution. Where we are the only NEARS National Estuarine Research Reserve in Maine. The next closest one is Great Bay, New Hampshire, and we work pretty closely together. So Connecticut just came online a couple of years ago, and we're really excited about that. And if you're really astute, you'll notice the only state on there, the only coastal state that does not have a national reserve is Louisiana, but they're getting one, we think. This is where I work. It doesn't look like the Isles of Shoals, but it's a squishy, spongy marsh environment. And living in this marsh is all kinds of amazing animals, plants, and just a whole host of really great communities coming together working. This is our Little River Marsh, which is about 2,000 acres. And then the marsh behind it is the Web-Handed River Estuary, which has Wells Harbor, if you've ever been over there. It's about 20 miles up 95, if you ever want to go there. Very cool place. We have a visitor center and trails and all that stuff. So why crustaceans? Why am I choosing crustaceans? And just for record, I'm not just going to talk about lobsters this evening, because I wanted to really introduce you to two other crustaceans that we've been working pretty closely with over the last few years. But crustaceans respond really well to environmental change. They're highly sensitive to temperature and pH and all kinds of ocean chemistry and conditions. And so I feel like they're a good sentinel for change. And they're also highly mobile. They move around a lot. So if you want to understand why they're moving, what motivates them to move, what's changing, they're also great study solutions for that. And they are ecologically and economically very consequential. What I mean by that is they're big fisheries for them with lots and lots of money that's generated. This is just a quick little graph from a paper that I really like on the global rise of crustacean fisheries. And I just want to point out those two green bars. Those green bars represent the total number of landings of crustacean fisheries worldwide between 1990 and 2016. And as you can see, it's a really, really big proportion of our world's fisheries. I'm not dissing the fish people here, okay? I love fish, but you can't hold a candle to what the comparison with fish. Fish present a whole other challenge in and of itself. So let's start with our first poster child here. This is the North American lobster, Palmaris americanus. A couple of people commented to me they wanted me to give a presentation on how to eat them. I said you can probably look that up. I'm sure some of you don't want to eat them. So being respectful, this is the American lobster. They're amazing, amazing animals. National Geographic and other places have done stories on this lobster boom in Maine. That lobster number is really high over the last 2 years. That's a fairly true statement. But warming and alterations in habitat, bottom habitat becoming warmer, lobsters have a tendency to move away from temperatures they don't like that are adverse. So we're seeing a change in the distribution of lobsters. This is a little map of the Gulf of Maine. So just to orient you, Gulf of Maine is that little reddish area there. And you can see that color scale, that heat map, is temperature differences. So the warmer the color, the warmer those waters are getting. And you can see we are in an area that's warming rapidly and consistently. And some of you have probably seen this graph before from Gulf of Maine Research Institute. If you're attending UNH, you're going to see graphs like this throughout your 4 years, probably more than once. This is the Gulf of Maine temperature, sea surface temperature anomalies. So what that really means is how different from normal are our sea surface temperatures over time. And the blue line is the global ocean, and the orange line is the Gulf of Maine itself. Okay, and you can see that we're almost 0.84 degrees per decade warmer since the 1980s. And that's a really big change. And if you're a fish, a crustacean, if you're a macroalgae, if you're an oyster, that spells trouble in a lot of ways. Another way to look at this is the incidence of what we call marine heat waves. How many here have heard of marine heat waves? You've heard of like land heat waves, right? But marine heat waves are being documented, and there's been lots of data accumulated on this sort of phenomenon. And if you just look in that box there that I highlighted, most of the anomalies, most of the heat waves that we've seen in the Gulf of Maine have been after 2012. I remember the first one in 2012, everybody freaked out. The lobster fishery almost tanked. And everybody thought, okay, this is just a one and done. We're going to be okay. That pattern of heat waves, the incidence of heat waves has just kept going. And so that's cause for concern because we have a fishery, a lobster fishery in Maine that is worth last year over $600 million per year just in the state of Maine, which is where we are right now. So, and that doesn't include tourism and all that other, and canneries, industry, and things like that. So lobster makes up a huge proportion of our economy in Maine and is ecologically really important. Quick lobster 101 life cycle. Lobsters spend most of their life in the benthos on the bottom. Probably already knew that, but what you probably didn't know or may not have known is that lobsters can hold their eggs Females lay their eggs up to a year. It's typically 9 to 11 months is the gestation and development period. Those eggs hatch. You have 4 larval or zoeal or planktonic stages. And then that last stage, what we call a post-larval lobster, and that lobster settles to the bottom and becomes a big lobster over lots of time. That's all driven by temperature. So every piece of that life cycle is driven by temperature. Even small modulations in those temperatures, huge impacts on whether they get through a piece of that. Okay. So one of the things that our group has been trying to do at Wells is better understand how temperature different aspects of their life cycle, not just one phase of a lobster's life, but different phases of development. So we had some funding from the National Sea Grant Program over the last 3 to 4 years. We're really greatly appreciative of that funding. We hope that funding continues. We're not sure what's going to happen with that. But we're looking at 3 different pieces of lobster life history. So the first thing we're doing is we're trying to assess if egg-bearing females, and that's a picture of a lobster on the right with a huge clutch of eggs, and she holds on to those eggs for almost a year. So we're trying to see, one of the things we're trying to answer is how do changes in temperature influence her ability to select different habitats? In other words, is she using temperature as a way to select thermal habitat? And then we're also measuring how well lobster larvae swim in warming waters. So, how they, physiologically speaking, behaviorally speaking, can they get from A to B? And the third thing we're looking at is trying to model lobster larval dispersal based on potential shifts in their range, the fact that they might be moving into deeper, cooler water. So I'm just going to take you through very quickly a few highlights of how these experiments ran. To answer the first question about thermal preferences in egg-bearing or ovigerous females, we set up this giant flume tank. It took about a year to set it up, so it was absolutely horrendous. It was during COVID. It was absolute hell. There's no other way to describe it. I can't believe we pulled it off. But in the end, we created a system that had a gradation of temperatures. And we would stick lobster in there. We'd stick a temperature logger on we'd let her go. We'd cover the tank. We'd come back the next day and we would see where she went. Was able to freely pass through baffles to a different section. And this is just an example over about a 24-hour period of a lobster. This was an ovigerous female who had eggs that were really late stage, and all those little fangs there in the data, those are all movements. So she's going and sampling all these different temperatures, going over here, going over here, going over here. We don't even have to use video to do that because we have a temp log that just tell us where she's at. So this is a very typical output from that experiment. And if you put it all together, and I know this is a very busy slide, so I apologize. Here's my pointer. If you look over there, what I want you to get out of this is temperature preference and activity of the lobster is dependent on her egg stage. Okay, that's really important. So for example, if you're a lobster and you are in the early stages of development, you're looking for cold water. If you're late stage eggs, you're looking for a variety of different temperatures, but your activity, those yellow bars, go way up. So you get really antsy. You're trying to find a place where you can hatch your eggs. And then we did some acoustic telemetry in another study that actually pinpointed what depths they go to. So we could connect those dots, if you will. But the point is, no one's ever looked at their egg-bearing lobster prefers to go to different places to hatch her eggs, which has huge implications on where those larvae go. Okay, so we're going to go back to the life cycle, and now we're going to focus on that stage 4. So female hatches her eggs, right? and I did a little cartoon. Bear with me, because it took me time to do. But climate change is warming the Gulf of Maine. Lobsters seem to be shifting. The shoals right there, those little green patches. So lobsters tend to be moving into deeper waters to hatch their larvae. So if that's the case, if she's moving into deeper waters, how does that impact the swimming behavior and the physiology of those little swimming lobster larvae to get back to shore? Because they have to get back to shallow waters in order to settle the bottom. Okay, there's very little evidence to suggest they can do it in deep water. So what we did was we designed a lab experiment. That's the actual size. We built these little jellyfish chrysal tanks. They're like little merry-go-rounds that keep the water moving in like a laminar flow. And we had some swimming post larvae. We had some that were just sitting around in the tank. That was our control. We called them the couch potatoes. And then we had two different temperatures. So we had 15 degrees, which is like optimal for the Gulf of Maine and lobster larvae and growth. And we had 22 degrees, which is a very conservative estimate of Gulf of Maine temperatures for 2050. Okay, and then we had some controls that we just shoved in a freezer. We crushed them up. We looked at all their lipids and protein and stuff. So here's a video. The tank on the left is the 22-degree treatment. I want you to notice how active they are. And the tank on the right is the 50-degree temperature. And then 72 hours later, that's how long we trial. You notice the little guys and gals on the bottom of the 22-degree tank are just sitting there. They're just exhausted from swimming. And we attribute that in part to temperature. So this was a really interesting finding, and we did biochemical analysis on these and found that they had lower lipids. The ones that were in the warmer water were using up their fuel faster. So metabolically, they were compromised. If you put all that together, you get something that looks like this. We just published this last year, and really exciting. So it's the mean proportion of post larvae that are swimming on the y-axis. On the x-axis is the 72 hours. And you can see that overall, there's this pattern where the 22-degree animals kind of drop out sooner. Their activity drops out sooner. You might also notice, if you're really astute, that there's a diel pattern of swimming here. So that's something we want to look into, because that's not random at all. There's some pattern. The last thing that we did, so we have these egg-bearing females looking at temperature preferences, shifting into deeper water, the ability of lobster post larvae to swim under stressful thermal conditions. And the third component is, hey, what happens if they are hatching further offshore? What are the currents doing? And could currents and directional swimming get them back to those shallow nursery grounds? We know that post-larval lobsters have some directionality to their swimming. No one's ever shown it. We just have a hunch. So we went on that hunch, and we built these drifters. These were all built in my basement during COVID, which was really fun. There were like 30 drifters. They're pretty big. They're look like a giant fox kite with a GPS and a solar light, and these really big sails. Some of them crashed into Appledore. I know this because we got a call from somebody. But here's what they did overall. They went crazy, right? They went in a lot of different directions, but we used these current paths, and we worked with two people from UNH TCOM, Dr. Tom Litton and Jang Choi, and we were able to actually put biology and oceanography together and come up with a model that was a biophysical model, taking biology of the lobster, the physical components, and how far out those drifters went. And I don't have the results to show you right now, but what I can tell you is that the further out a lobster's hatching, the harder it is for them to swim back successfully. That's not too shocking, right? Based on the other two pieces of evidence I gave you. But we also determined that there's a lot of variability year to year in surface currents around here. And you also have to take into account the fact that there is directionality. So if a lobster has no directionality, doesn't know how to find its way back here, then it is a lot more random and you get a lot of larval mortality. So this is sort of a work in progress. We did publish the model this year, so something you can look up if you're interested. Okay, this is just a fun toy that was built for lobsters. This is a cardiac heart activity tracking device. So you take a GoPro camera, you take the camera out, you plug in a Arduino microcontroller, you plug in all these electronics, you miniaturize the whole thing, and you can measure the lobster's heart rate, direction it's moving, etc. And so if you let it go with a tag on it, an acoustic tag, you can follow it around, decide and figure out what is it doing, how far is it going, what types of temperatures is it experiencing, and how is it impacting where it's moving, is how it's impacting its physiology. So it's a really cool tool that we've used. And my coworker, Dr. Ben Gutzler, put out this really nice paper. It's a low-cost open source data logger. So you can attach this to a horseshoe crab. You can attach it to a lot of different types of animals. As long as it will fit on their back, you could try it out. So if you're interested in it, let me know. Okay. I'm sure there's questions, but I'm going to segue to the next animal on the list here. This is a native species. So this is a Jonah crab. How many people here have seen a Jonah crab on shoals? Yeah, there's some in the sea tray if you want to go look. They're really cool. There's so much not known about Jonah crabs. It's mind-blowing to me because it's becoming a decent-sized fishery. So here is some data. This is landings of Jonah crab and value. The landings in green, value in blue. And this is since the 1970s. This is being tracked by the Atlantic States Marine Fisheries Commission, which oversees fisheries management plans along the U.S. East Coast. And what you'll notice in general is that Jonah crab catches increased quite a bit. And 70% of that catch is from southern New England. Anybody know why that's the case? This is an open question. Anyone want to take a guess? Why most Jonah crabs are caught in southern New England? Their numbers have increased more in the south. Yep. They use the same traps that they use here. Yeah, but that's a great answer. Anybody else have a? That's another reason. Does anybody know what the lobster population in southern New England is doing right now? Really bad. It's been doing bad for the last 30 years. So fishers are switching over to alternative species. And one of those is Jonah crab. And there's also a really robust offshore population of Jonah crab as well. And a lot of those vessels are out of places like New Bedford and Providence and places like that. So we're seeing this trend in southern England, and we're wondering here in Maine and New Hampshire, gee, how is this going to impact us? Because we want to know something about Jonah crab that's going to help us more sustainably manage this fishery, because this fishery is just taking off. It's what I would call an emerging fishery. It's been around, but it's really emerging, and they're using the same lobster trap. They get caught in the same traps that lobsters get caught in. So, so some folks in southern New England are actually supplementing, and they're not lobstering anymore. They've switched over to Jonah crab. Some people have. The other thing that they're doing with Jonah crabs is they are some places it's a claw-only fishery. So instead of taking the whole, they take they take the claws off and they sell the claws because the claws have the majority of the meat in them. So it's not really a great practice. If anybody here know what stone crabs are in the Bahamas and the Caribbean, they stone crab fishery is claw only as well, and in the southern US. But we wanted to know, how does that change things in with Jonah crab, because Jonah crab is just a species we don't know a lot about. So we did an experiment a few years ago where we removed claws from Jonah crabs 2 different ways. We trying to find a sustainable, less adverse way of taking claws off of a crab. I know it sounds really gross and cruel, but we had to do the science really helped here, because we determined that if you snap them off, right? And fishermen do this all the time, and they claim they do it, and the crabs are great. We beg to differ on that, because we had over 80% mortality when you snap the claws off and get these very large wounds. You get a lot of blood, hemolymph loss. Then we decided to use some snipping tools, and the snipping tools give you a much smaller wound size, and that wound size basically cauterizes itself as soon as you throw that crab back in the water. And so we got almost 100% survivorship from crab that we do this mechanical removal tool. So we're trying to get harvesters to try to use this technique in places like southern New England in the Jonah crab fleet, and let us know how it works out. And this technique is now also being adopted in Bahamas for stone crab fishery there as well. So we're really proud of this. And it was something that kind of evolved sort of organically. Just thought there's got to be a better way to do this for a fishery that we want to be sustainable. Of course, the big question is, do the claws grow back, right? That's a really obvious question, because on stone crabs, they grow right back because those crabs are living in water that's like 70, 80 degrees all the time. So they're molting and growing faster. Jonah crabs, we are not getting good data on regeneration times. So they're just really, really slow. They like cold water, and they don't like to move very much. We also looked at the sublethal effects of claw removal of Jonah crab. So we did a whole bunch of experiments over the last few years. We wanted to see if Jonah crabs could mate. If a male could mate with a female if you took off one of his claws. We wanted to see if they could feed efficiently with only one claw. We wanted to see how it impacted their movement with one. So some of this we have published. Other stuff here we're still working on, like the movement data. We also had an interesting experiment where we designed a force sensor, like one of these paddles that you can squeeze, and it measures the force that you're exerting on it. We thought there might be some compensatory mechanism. If you squeeze, if you lose one claw, the other becomes stronger. I can't tell you the results yet because I'm still working on it, but it's a really interesting project. These are all student projects, by the way. And Anna Durrance, who was an undergrad student at UNH, is the first author on this paper where we took a lot of these experiments, we kind of cobbled them together, and we wrote it up. And what's really cool about science sometimes is that when a group of people are making a fishery management plan for a species that never had one first, and then they're coming to us and saying, hey guys, we want to learn more about your research because we're writing a management plan for a species that doesn't have one. That's pretty cool. So that's where the science is actually being applied. So that always gets me excited. Here's a little graphic video of some Jonah crab movements we're currently working on. This experiment we already did. This is work we did with Dr. Nathan Fury at UNH and one of his students. And we're trying to understand do crabs move less or more, how movements are affected with quality. So it's a really important facet of this project is movement ecology. Okay. Is everybody still with me on this? Because I'm jumping around to different species. This is my second to last one. So this is green crab, and I'm going to go through this quickly. Green crab, we don't like green crab, right? They're invasive. They're really, really, really invasive. So I believe they are on every continent in the world except for Antarctica. Yes, they're in Australia and Tasmania. Well, and that we have them here. We've had them here for over 200 years, and they're everywhere. In fact, we did a study in mid-coast. We did a study in Maine a while ago where we trapped for green crabs along the Maine coast. So from Wells, where we're located, all the way up to Penn Bay. And this is my favorite graph in the world. That's a bark, and it is made of crabs. That is not fake, that's real. And you can see very clearly that Wells, Maine has way more green crabs catch per unit effort than any of these other sites. So we knew like, hey, what do green crabs like about Wells? And is this out of the ordinary? So decades ago in the 1950s, shellfish commissioners would get inundated with green crabs on their beaches, on their oyster reefs, all the places. And so there's been issues with green crabs in the past. This is not necessarily a new thing, but this is a persistent thing. And salt marshes get really degraded by green crabs. All those holes you see are green crabs burrowing. We actually did CT scans of cores in our marsh and found green crabs down at least 1 meter into the marsh. Nathan Fury and I did a couple of studies on movement with some students, and we determined that green crabs actually don't move that far. They use the habitats they have, they use the resources they have. There's a little bit of a seasonal shift in the winter, in the fall and the winter, but they're around all year, and they produce eggs all year round. Those are little acoustic tags on their back that was a real pain in the neck to stick on. So the question is, what do we do with green crabs? We feed them. We know a decent amount of their biology. Should we just pack them up and send them all back to Europe? That's where they came from. The answer is we're trying to help harvesters come up with different ways of eating them and utilizing them. In California, this is really cool. I put this in because I know there's marine mammals people in here. This is my only marine mammal slide. Sea otters were introduced into Elkhorn Slough Estuary. And if you can see, the red line is sea otter abundance when they were introduced. And the blue line is green crab catch. And you can see as soon as sea otters go into the system, what happens to green crabs? They just tank. And you can see there's a green crab with eggs in that otter's mouth. So otters eat green crabs really, really well, and they eat a lot of them. But that doesn't work here because we don't have sea otters. I think we used to. I'm not a marine. I know nothing about marine mammals, so somebody will have to tell me. But this is a very cool paper. You can do a lot with green crabs. You can make whiskey. You can make soup. You can make crab rangoon. I've tried all of these things. Some are really good. Some are absolutely horrible. And so what we're working with, one of the projects we did was, real quick, is we worked with harvesters in York, Maine, and we decided we got to figure out a way where they can sell soft shell green crab. These are green crab that molt. They get a higher dollar value. They can pull a lot of them out. So we were harvesting green crabs. The problem is it's so hard to tell if a green crab is ready to molt. It's really difficult to do. So we developed a blood test where you needle in the crab, you pull out a few drops of blood, you stick it on a refractometer, this little telescopy thing. You read the number, and if it's above, if it's in the 3 category, we made a color scale for harvesters to test it out. And if you're in the 3 or higher, then that crab has a greater than 50% chance of bolting. It's worth being on it and taking care of it until it bolts, and then you sell it or eat it. So this has been a really, really cool project that's very much applied, and one way that we feel can help perhaps mitigate king crab populations just a little bit, or at least increase awareness so people have an idea of, hey, there's alternate avenues. Okay, the last species I'm going to talk about is this one. This one really is the curveball, because I know I see people smiling like, does he know that these things aren't really here? They're not. They're not endemic to the Gulf of Maine. Blue crab, anybody here from Mid-Atlantic? Yeah, so you know blue crab very well. And there are reports of blue crabs in the Gulf of Maine going back to the 1800s, the paper from the 1920s. There's work done in the 60s. Now, blue crabs are an invasive species in Europe. So there's populations in Italy, Sicily, Sardinia, France, Spain, Tunisia, Algeria, pretty much most of the Mediterranean at this point. So it's kind of odd that our blue crab is their invasive species now. So we're working with some of these folks. The question that we have is, are they here to stay? So we really call this is not an invasive species for us. This is a range expansion. So this is water, we think, water is getting warmer, allowing blue crabs to permeate into the Gulf of Maine and set up shop there. Whether they're breeding, how often they're reproducing, we just don't know. So really the big question for us is this a new kid on the block? Like, is this crab here to stay? Or is it just here temporarily? And when things change, they're just going to be gone. This paper that one of my coworkers published last year, Laura Crane, she showed that blue crabs overwinter in our salt marsh. They bury themselves in the mud. The temperature is warmer under the mud. Think of it like a wool blanket, like insulation. It can persist, and we found them the next spring. We tagged some, and then we came back and they were in the same spot. So we wrote a little paper on this because it was a really cool observation, being able to demonstrate that blue crabs actually have the ability to overwinter in Maine. More on that in a second. So here's a very quick history of what we're doing. What's really great about Wells Reserve is we see an issue like this, and then we jump to do long-term monitoring, which is a really rare thing to do. So we've said, we want to know where they are, spatial distribution, temporal distribution, and start tracking that. So we found the first blue crab in our area in 2019. In 2020, we found live crabs in the marsh. We started trapping from 2020 to the present, and we trapped in two of our estuaries that we manage, the Webb Hannet and the Little River. We've got about a dozen traps out there. Some of the crabs we catch are absolutely enormous. Like, I'm afraid to go near them. And I handle lobsters all the time, and I'm super intimidated by these. And here's our data. This is really cool because I think we're the only place around here that has sort of long-term or medium-term data on catch. So 2023 was a blockbuster year. We don't know why. We know that the winter before that, winter of 2023, was pretty warm. We didn't see temperatures drop too low. I'm not showing you, we don't have 2024 ready. 2025, we've only caught, I think, 10 blue crabs so far this year. And we think, anybody know why the numbers are so low this year? Anyone want to take a guess? We have an idea. Anybody? Yes, exactly. Anybody that was around northern New England or New England this winter, our winter was really cold. I went out to our salt marsh a few times. I had a cross country ski to get out there. I've never had to do that in the 10 years I've worked there. So things were really cold. And in the spring, took forever for the water to warm up. So we think that may have provided some mortality event for those blue crabs. So we're doing a lot of different things. It's Emily Burke on the left, who is a master's student at UNH, who did a lot of the tracking and movement work. Ben Gutzler helped with that too. And then that's Sammy Smith on the right. She's an intern of ours, and she's been looking at the interactions of the blue crab and the crab. I'm not going to tell you the results yet. You can ask me. It's kind of like a Mad Max Armageddon thing. It's really very dramatic. So what we're doing now with blue crabs, and I'm going to wrap up. We have a sea grant from Maine, and we're putting together a blue crab network for northern New England, so we can get people together to talk about blue crab research and tap into experts from the Mid-Atlantic for advice. We have a community monitoring program, so we're giving traps and helping community partners get permits so they can trap blue crabs if they're interested in their area. Right now, we think we have 5 or 6 community groups that are doing that. We're doing an acoustic telemetry study, so we're sticking tags on blue crabs and following them around. We're doing that in Wells, and we're doing that in the New Meadows estuary in Brunswick, Maine. And then Manomet, a partner that we work with, is producing a dashboard in tandem with UNH. And we're looking at where people can crowdsource and document crabs that they find. So we're trying to do things to sort of build this capacity for the inevitable, or maybe not inevitable, spin up of a new fishery in the Gulf of Maine, where we potentially could have a blue crab fishery someday. I don't know when. We may never have it if we have cold winters, but we also could have it, and we should prepare for that. So that's sort of my take on my crustaceans that I work with, and I'm really appreciative of your attention, and I want to thank all the students and collaborators and all of you for coming and listening. So thank you very much. Questions?
Yes,
we have time.
The plan now is open it up for a few questions.
Yeah.
And if you're participating on Zoom, you can put your questions in the box at the bottom of your screen, and somebody, probably you, will read them out loud. People in the room hear the questions. If you're in the room, we'll ask you to use the mic so people on Zoom can hear your questions. You need to use the mic, or the Zoom people won't be able to hear you.
Jason, what's the best way to eat green crab?
Green crab. What I'm seeing people do, so the harvesters that actually sell them, they sell them to like high-end restaurants in Boston, Portland, and Portland, New Hampshire. And they basically make a seafood stock out of it. And I showed that cookbook. It's actually really good. There's all kinds of good stuff in there, but probably the easiest thing to do with them is boil them down and make a seafood stock that you can make a stew out of. Because there really isn't much meat in a green crab. Yeah. So, but we're trying.
Jason, pick your next question.
Okay. This person here, and then this guy over here.
Question.
Okay.
The first one is, if we're very like big event that in this field, would you want them to do it?
It's a great question. I know I didn't put together a how did I get here slide. I'm sorry, because I know a lot of you are like thinking about careers and where you want to go in your life. Um, Short story is I got a break. I got a job at the New England Aquarium in Boston. And my first day, they said, you're going to go clean the penguin trays. And everybody here is like, ooh, penguins. Cool. I lasted one day. I just couldn't deal with them. And they bit me and I had all kinds of issues. I also was not properly trained. So then I said the next day, do you have anything else I can do here? I said, Jared, you want to work with lobsters? We have a hatchery on the 5th floor, the size of a broom closet. I said, sure, I'll do it. And that was how I got hooked. Yeah, just the opportunity to do something, keeping my mind open and knowing what you don't want to do is as important as what you do want to do. That helped me a lot. Yeah. And your second question.
I like about the crab and the melting and the blood test. If they are melted, is there a, if it's bad to sell them or eat them? It's just ideal to wait.
I soft shell crab commands a better price. It's because people that it's like a delicacy, I guess. I don't eat it, but people really like it. In Italy, if you go to Venice, they sell green crab. It's called moeche, I think, and it's like 30 or 40 euros for like a plate of them for soft shell green crab. So they really like get into it. Yeah. But that is a product that would, that is marketable, I think. I'm a scientist though, so I don't do any of the business stuff. Okay, there was a question in back. And then Parker.
Hi, thank you for coming to speak with us today, but I have one question about the blue crabs in the vein of them being an invasive species. Besides eating them, and I guess also the ring crabs, what are other ways that scientists and I don't know, other people in the community handle like invasive species and reducing that population?
So yeah, so blue crab are, first of all, blue crab tastes really good. So I know the people who are from Delaware and New Jersey and North Carolina know this already. So it has instant marketability. So I think the best way to utilize blue crab, if it is persistent here, if we find it year after year in any decent number, is to probably fish it. And there's an argument to be made that it would someday become a part of our natural ecosystem. Green crabs, I would argue, are a naturalized species at this point. Like we have to just manage it as a species because it's been here so long. There are the purists that would say it's invasive, we got to get rid of it, no matter what. So it's a balancing act. And we're with a blue crab, we're sort of with green crabs, we know they're here every year. They don't tend to, they fluctuate a little bit, but they tend to be everywhere all the time. With blue crabs, we don't know if that's going to be the case here. So we're sort of still exploring what are the drivers, physiological drivers, or otherwise that may or may not allow blue crabs to persist here, right? So there's a difference between finding one and then finding one and coming back, finding another one, like the frequency of that. Does that help?
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah. Okay. Parker. Parker's had his hand up for a while. Yeah.
I would just like to ask, so I know that blue crabs are considerably larger than your average green crab. So I'm just wondering if they do eventually move up here for good, could that potentially like dwindle the green crab population?
So glad you asked that
Because
question. And I did not.
they're duking it out, right?
Right.
And the blue crabs obviously got the advantage here. So
So this is a great shout out for my student, Sammy. So Sammy Smith has been working on this for 2 years. She's like a part-time intern. She's got like 3 other jobs and she's starting grad school this fall. And we're submitting this paper that she worked on for publication consideration. She looked at blue crab and green crab competition. Anybody want to take a guess what happens when you stick a blue crab and a green crab together? It does not go well, usually. The blue crab just destroys it, the green crab. Blue crabs are really formidable. Like they're really good predators. But then what we did was Sammy wanted to try if you stick multiple green crabs and one blue crab. So we tried all these different combinations of green crabs and one blue crab, because the reality is there's so many green crabs in our estuary that a blue crab is unlikely to just face one. So we found that things get complicated. There's like a hierarchy. And I can talk to you during my class. I can talk to you at length about it. But the short answer is yes, maybe. Blue crab might be able to mitigate or decrease green crab population, but we still don't know if blue crabs are even able to hack it up here because they didn't do so well last winter.
All right, thank you very much.
Welcome. Yeah.
Okay, my instructions from Sarah Morris is I'm supposed to call time at this point. And I'm supposed to tell everybody that these talks are recorded and they will be posted to the Shoals live stream page on the website, shoalsmarinelaboratory.org. And for folks who are on the island right now, don't forget that even after you leave the island, you can join stuff online. And of course, if you're on the island and you're going to be here for the next few days and your question didn't get answered, Jason's still going to be here. So please join me in thanking Jason for such a terrific talk.